yeah, over the next few minutes, I'm just going to describe a research study that myself and some colleagues undertook. And the title is Exploring Nursing Students' Understanding and Experiences of Academic Resilience, and it was a qualitative study. So in terms of kind of there's some sort of background and an introduction, we know there's lots of research and evidence available that actually tells us how demanding that pre-registration nursing programmes are, and we're well aware of some of the mental health problems that are common to some students, and we've probably all actually are working with students currently who have shown some anxiety, and in some cases something more kind of in terms of depression, but certainly some mental health problems that have been associated with the kind of the challenges for students who undertake the 3-year training, the 3-year academic programme. And in particular, there's a little bit of literature out there. There's not a huge amount, unfortunately, that talks about academic distress. And what limited evidence there is does suggest that it impacts negatively. So academic distress does have a negative impact on students' mental well-being as well. So it is really important that we understand a little bit more about academic distress, and also that we understand a little bit about the factors that contribute to it and how it might be mitigated. So how some students deal with it, whether they deal with it positively or whether they deal with it negatively. And I think I've already mentioned that actually the knowledge and the evidence that's available out there around academic resilience in nursing students is very hard to come by. There's not a great deal out there. So my colleagues and I set about doing a small study, and the aim of the study was to explore nursing students' understanding and their experiences of academic resilience. And the objectives were to identify how students dealt with those academic challenges that they were faced with, how they managed difficult academic situations, how they developed their academic confidence, or their confidence in their academic ability, how they remain motivated when sometimes they might get poor grades or they don't get the grades that they're expecting, or in some cases they fail assessments, and how they developed a positive kind of adaptation, some of the strategies that they might use in what we already know are very complex circumstances, with the students having to spend 50% of their time on placement, 50% of their time at university with their academic work, and how actually they manage those complex situations, which we already knew influenced their anxieties. So we also wanted to perhaps identify some and recognise some of the factors that influence students' academic resilience. So again, looking at sort of the strategies that they adopt. But also we wanted to look at ways in which we could potentially support students and influence maybe what future resources that there needed to be and what we could develop depending on what the data told us. So in terms of participants, we had 13 in total. So the study included postgraduate nursing students as well as the undergraduate nursing students. So from the postgraduate programme, we had 4 students that we interviewed on a one-to-one basis. And from the undergraduate nursing programme, we had 3 focus group interviews. So we had a focus group for year 1, focus group for year 2, and one for year 3, and they were semi-structured interviews. Now, the reason that we had the differences between the one-to-one interviews and the focus group interviews were purely down to logistics, because trying to get postgraduate students to be able to attend a focus group, because they were working in different trusts and different areas, wasn't possible. So hence we had to kind of adopt the sort of the methods that we used. And I haven't actually put it on here, but just to let you know that this and we did the interviews about a year ago, so it was probably about this time last year. So obviously because of the pandemic, then the interviews we did those online via Zoom or Teams. So in terms of the findings and analysing the data, we identified 6 main themes, which were defining resilience, obstacles and challenges, past experiences, coping strategies, attitudes, and connectiveness. So I'm just kind of very quickly, briefly going to go through each of those. So in terms of defining academic resilience, the students found it really, really hard to define what was meant by academic resilience. And they also found it difficult to give examples and when they felt that they'd shown academic resilience. However, what they did do was they associated it with challenging times. They also associated it with an individual's ability to persevere, and it was also associated with a level of determination. The kind of the analogy of being a bouncy ball or a kind of spring was used quite regularly from the students that we interviewed, and they talked about a couple of kind of very brief examples here from the transcripts. Was that they talked about not giving up. So again, it was about that determination and perseverance, and also being able to spring back into shape following some sort of adversity. So obstacles and challenges, most of the participants described to us the competing demands. So again, having kind of 50% of the time on placement, and the expectations from placement and clinical assessments, as well as their academic assessments as well. And with the obstacles and challenges, one of the things that they identified was kind of key to being able to address some of those challenges was time management. Also, some of the students talked about one of the challenges being kind of having low self-esteem and also low sort of self-doubt as well, and that was quite often influenced by their academic performance. So if they failed an assessment or they didn't get a particularly high mark, then they felt that really impacted on their kind of their self-esteem, that lowered their self-esteem, and it also made them doubt their academic ability. Some of the participants also talked about this anxiety and a feeling of guilt. So if they were taking time off from their academic work, they actually felt quite guilty about it because they felt that they should actually be studying and not having time off or time to themselves. And a couple of participants also described how kind of this feeling of guilt or anxiety was often only relieved by reassurance from other people or significant others that then prompted their motivation. And one of the participants also said that they compared themselves to others all the time. And they were always asking, like, well, what was your mark and what did you get and what did I get, and comparing them to others, which then again impacted on their low self-esteem and this kind of self-doubt that they experienced. It was generally, not always, but it was generally the postgraduate students who talked about how they'd learned from past experiences and how that had influenced their academic resilience. So it was kind of, when I was an undergraduate student, I learned what worked for me, and it was kind of a bit of trial and error, and I've just got better over time. But that was also apparent in a couple of the undergraduate students, but it was apparent that that was more relevant to those undergraduate students who are more mature students, who'd had maybe a previous job or had families and felt that, again, they'd learned because they'd had to study while having a family or maybe part-time job, actually enhanced their ability to deal with academic distress. In terms of coping strategies, some of them described the way that they dealt with the numerous assessments that they had in starting work early, drawing themselves up assessment timetables. When they felt kind of distressed from the academic work, they felt pressure from deadlines. Some participants talked about the use of exercise and hobbies, and they're also taking time away from their study and giving themselves a little bit of a break and time off. So it was kind of the reward system, and if you reward yourself, it helps, as one participant described to us. Attitudes was quite significant in that some of the participants talked about having self-discipline and how important self-discipline was to reducing academic distress or prompting academic resilience, having an optimistic attitude, having a positive personality. So they all appeared to positively contribute to academic resilience. And one student said some people panic but are actually laid back. So there appeared to be some kind of personality traits that lended themselves more to having that academic resilience. And then finally, connectiveness was really important. The participants described the importance of maintaining support, and that was from family, from peers, quite often, importantly from academics themselves. So kind of, particularly with this theme, the importance of maintaining attachment in building academic resilience seemed to be quite key and significant. And as one participant described, it helps to just talk things through with someone and keep that contact. So again, it was that connectiveness that was really important. So in terms of the discussion, all of the participants described some sort of academic stresses that they'd experienced. They also acknowledged the importance of effective social support, self-efficacy and having a positive outlook, and they were all key to academic success. It would appear that personal attributes and some personal characteristics were very influential, so having a positive outlook, having high self-esteem was kind of quite key in reducing academic distress. Academic resilience appeared from the data to be quite an unstable phenomenon, which can be either improved or strengthened. And also academic resilience appears to increase with the adoption of certain strategies. And some of those strategies like exercise, taking time off, having that connectiveness, are some of the strategies that were described to us. So in conclusion, again, all participants identified the significance of academic resilience. It appears to be impacted by both internal and external factors. That sense of belonging, connectiveness, all appeared to be quite essential for academic success. Academic resilience for some seemed to develop positively over time, affording themselves some rewards and time off appeared to be really important in dealing with academic distress. Findings do suggest that academic resilience can be developed and nurtured. There is a need to develop a great awareness. I think that what we know about it, it's more complex than we think it is. So obviously we need to raise awareness about it with students, as well as academics and other parties as well. But key is fostering a culture where very much an individual approach is adopted, because it was quite evident from the data that everyone is quite unique and one size won't ever fit all. Okay, that's me done.
Okay, thank you, Carolyn. I think we've got time. We went a little bit over, but I think we've got time for one question. It's okay. Does anyone have any questions for Carolyn?
Carolyn, just can you stop sharing the screen so we can see you a little bit better? Thank you.
I've stopped. I think there might be a delay, is it? I have stopped sharing, promise. Is it gone?
It might be coming.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Yeah, it's really? A bit of a delay.
Anyway, let's ask, yeah.
Try again.
Yeah, it's done. Now?
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm conscious of the time as well, so we hand over to Lorna if there's no questions.
Okay, if you've got any questions, then maybe share it in the chat. I mean, Carolyn, I'm interested in just next steps for your research, because you clearly have got practical implications that you found. But can we maybe continue that in the chat? So I'm just conscious of time, and then we want to.
Yeah. I'd be more than happy to have a quick chat with anybody about it. Yeah, no problem.
Thank you, Carolyn. Okay, Lorna, can you share with us your talk and presentation?
Okay, can everyone hear me? Yeah, and
yep.
You can see the slides?
Yeah.
thumbs up, brilliant. I can only see one of you, so that's great. So I'm Lorna. I'm developing a new formative assessment and assessment support strategy for first year law students. We're doing this in response to student feedback that indicated students were wanting more assessment support generally and had some concerns and fears about assessment. So what we did was we set up a focus group. So we had about 20 students show up to that to talk through everything really about assessment. So there were some guided questions, and then there was obviously plenty of time for them to raise things that really were important to them. There was a lot of great feedback that we got back from that, but I suppose there was 4 key messages that came through. First of all, a lot of misunderstanding about feedback, students not really seeing the importance of it and what to do with it when they received feedback. There was also misunderstandings around the benefits of different forms of formative assessment activity. We had some really quite novel ideas that we'd been running with students, but they didn't understand what they were supposed to get out of those activities. So they were asking questions like, you know, how does an MCQ help me with my final written assignment? What is the point of peer evaluation? How can one of my classmates really give me effective feedback? So that was a big concern. Also, timing of feedback was an issue. Even though feedback's always given back within the 3-week turnaround that we have, students still felt that lag, that delay, made it very difficult for them to connect up with the feedback they were receiving and their actual assignments. Plus, the academic year moves on at a pace, so they're on to the next thing. And then finally, there was a real perceived, I suppose, you know, a focus on the importance of exemplar answers and model answers, and this very much seen as the kind of magic bullet that will help you to achieve exam success. So they were some of the key things we took from the focus group. So in response to this, my key proposal was to design a pilot educational innovation project that, you know, focusing first of all on first year law students, that would take a programmatic horizontal approach to formative assessment and assessment support. So what I mean by that is instead of looking at individual modules and module leaders thinking, well, what am I offering in my module? Instead, taking a step back and looking at what students are receiving in terms of assessment support, formative assessments across the entire year. Now, this is a pilot, so we're going to next academic year, we're going to focus on first years, but we hope if it's successful to develop that into our second, third and fourth years. So it becomes a whole program approach. The key idea really is to give students a varied package of assessment support, because from the feedback we received, it was very clear that students liked and disliked different activities. So what we plan for next year is some core activities. So meaning that students, you know, in each module, these core activities will be offered. So some seminars on assessment literacy, and workshops or seminars focusing on the assessment and assessment support. Also, some online activities around assessment, past papers made available to students, or if they're not available, some kind of sample assessment so students feel ready for whatever the assessment holds. In the run-up to assessment times, thinking about workshops and lectures on revision and consolidation strategies, and also revision surgeries run by all modules. In addition to this, then we've got kind of what we call non-core activities, so specific activities for different modules, and we've tried to space those out across the year, so it's a kind of continuous process in the hope that students' confidence builds throughout the year. So we've got, for example, a marking activity in November, group presentations before Christmas, some NCQ exams, a peer review activity, your traditional marked written assignment. So the idea is that students have a lot of different activities that should help build their skills. And I think the most important aspect of each of these activities is that students acquire skills and knowledge that they can apply to all of their modules, not just the one that's running the assessment activity. So if we take public law there and the marked assignment, if we ask students to do a formative on that, then it's really important that we emphasize to students, number one, the transferability of essay writing skills, research skills learned in this activity can be transferred to other modules, and ensure students understand that any feedback they get on that particular essay, formative essay, can be used to help them improve performance across their modules. The messaging for this will take place through, first of all, we've drafted a very clear assessment support guide. And this will be accompanied by an induction workshop. And during that workshop, we're going to explain to students this programmatic approach that we're taking and really take time to explore what they think feedback is. Think about the different forms of feedback and opportunities for feedback. Consider who can actually give feedback to them. And I think a really important one is to develop, to help them develop an understanding of the value of non-tutor feedback. Talking through the advantages of peer review and self-assessment and ensuring they really know what to do with feedback once they receive it. I think, as you can see on the slide, that will be reinforced with academic advisor one-to-one meetings and workshops, where students can come and bring feedback they've received from one module, and as academic advisors, we help them see how that feedback can be taken forward to future modules and other modules that they're studying. And we'll also encourage them, and assist them or guide them where they need to on kind of bringing together, considering, reflecting on any feedback and feed forward they've received, and putting that into a plan, a kind of action plan of next steps on their kind of personal development journey throughout their academic study. I think taking this approach has a number of advantages. If you look rather than just at the module, but the whole program, I think you can adjust your focus, not from just, from simply focusing on assessment support to the development of key learning and study skills. I think students will be exposed to a full suite of different learning experiences. So you can include activities that encourage a sense of belonging, such as peer learning, peer evaluation, group presentations, and group work. I think individual modules can prioritize particular skills and deal with them in depth rather than trying to cover everything at once, which is always a stress that I have. Students hopefully can start seeing links between their modules and the emergence of these kind of lifelong skills that will carry them confidently, hopefully, into second year. And also students should start to recognize opportunities for feedback and be a lot more confident in how they can really use that feedback going forward. Just to kind of put this in context, I think it's useful to give you an actual example of one of these assessment support activities that we plan for next year. So one of these would be a 2-hour workshop in a lecture theatre. So it would be with a large group of students, about 200 students. In the first part of the workshop, students will be given a problem style question. They'll know about it in advance and they'll provide a written answer. And then immediately after that, in the second part, we'll hand out a guideline answer with some key points together with the marking criteria. Give the students a bit of time to digest that, and then for me to take them through the headline points. And then the key part in the third part of the workshop is for students to work in pairs, to mark one another's work and provide some key feedback. Following the session, there'll be a post-workshop activity where students will be asked to reflect on their work, the feedback that they've received and the feedback they've given, and having reflected on that, put together a plan of action going forward that can be discussed in their next seminar. Now, you're probably all thinking, yeah, but it's not as easy as that, is it, Lorna? Because peer evaluation can be really challenging for students. So we are mindful that that will be scaffolded throughout the academic year before we get to this particular point. So using shorter peer evaluation exercises in previous tutorials, completing a similar type of workshop earlier on in the year where students are given a question with 5 sample student answers that they mark together in groups and really examine the marking criteria and consider feedback. There'll also obviously be a discussion about the real benefits of peer evaluation, and also we'll provide some kind of feedback form so students are really guided how to provide that feedback with some simple questions such as name 3 things your peer did well, 3 things they need to improve, and I think really importantly for students, 3 things that you'll take away from this particular activity that you can incorporate into your own learning. We're also hoping, I'm trying to organise this at the moment, to include a peer-assisted learning session after the workshop but before their seminar, where they'll have an opportunity to discuss the activity, the feedback they gave, the feedback they received with second and third year students who've already studied the module. I think the real benefit of this kind of activity is not only does it help with developing lifelong learning skills, employability skills, but it enables students to start learning in a more active way in the lecture theatre and in large groups. And it encourages students to get to know different students, form bonds with different students that are outside their normal study groups. I hope I haven't been too long. Key takeaways, and then I'm done. So I think if you're thinking about assessment support activities, formative assessments, a programmatic approach is a possible, is possibly a good option, because rather than just focusing on assessment support, you can also think about the skills that we're trying to develop in our students. Also, I think it allows you to expose students to a full suite of different learning experiences and making sure there's no repetition. I think looking at this way, we can improve student engagement and sense of belonging by building activities into lectures so they don't feel that they are, when they're in a lecture theatre, that's going to be a passive experience. They get used to doing things, and also include various assessment support activities such as peer learning. And finally, on assessment support and feedback, I think it's important to spend time with students explaining the benefits of these different types of formative or assessment support activities. If students understand the kind of advantages, then they're likely to be much more willing participants. And finally, talk to students about feedback and really get them understanding how useful it can be and how they can take it forward. That's all that I had, apart from if there are any questions, and also if you've got any ideas or any thoughts that I can incorporate into the project for next year, I'd be interested in those. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Lorna. That was really interesting. Do we have any questions for Lorna? One thing I just wanted to ask, if that's okay, first, you with your assessment support activity, I think you may have just answered part of it. Is there any online provision? So for your lectures, are they all face-to-face, or are you planning on doing more of a flipped approach or any activities online?
So we always, a lot of it is face to face, but obviously mindful that sometimes students can't get to activities. So with something like this, I'll provide a kind of online version for students. So whereby, they can kind of go through a video and answer questions once they've had the documents in advance. So that'll be released after the session. But I really, we want to get as many people there as possible, but we do try and back that up with some online provision as well.
Great. Okay. Tunde, do you have a question?
Yeah, can I just ask on, I mean, the evidence is great, and Lorna, this sounds like a really good example of tackling student feedback and assessment and the scaffolding and all sorts of things. So my question is more around how you get staff on board, and can you talk a little bit about that? Because I guess that might be a question from other colleagues as well, how you do get that program cohesion and so that everyone is on board with this, which sounds great.
Yeah, no, that's I think that's the trickiest part. I think that's why first of all, I was very ambitious. It's like I'll do the whole program, but that's why we're doing it year by year, so we can get the kind of module leaders or teams together, together as a year. And actually, once you start talking to colleagues, you realize how many great things everyone's doing. There's a lot of activity. A lot of the work is actually already done. It's just we don't know about it because we don't speak enough about it. And then, looking at what do we have, where are the gaps, who feels like doing X, Y, and Z, and also, explaining to students, because there's a lot of these good activities, but they don't realize what they're getting out of it, which is why sometimes staff say, why should I bother? Because it's not appreciated. They don't see the point of it. And so it's really our job to try and help students understand that. So I was imagining it to be difficult, but actually bringing module leads together, there was a lot of work that had already been done. So there wasn't too much new work. And really the biggest fight was where it was going to come in the timetable, which we've kind of settled on. But I think you have to do it piece by piece, so then second and then third year.